Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend, because it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
Well, hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Today's topic, improving security and ransomware preparedness in healthcare environments. I want to start by saying a big thank you for joining us. On the EcoCast today, we're going to hear from experts at Rubrik and Census. So I'm Scott Becker with Actual Tech, and I am delighted to be your moderator for this EcoCast. Other members of the mod squad include Jess, who welcomed you here today, Keith Ward, and Mackenzie Puddesey. Now, not only will you get informed today, but three of you are going to be a little richer as we're giving away 3 Amazon gift cards worth $300 each. Now, as a reminder, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for that prize. Okay, enough of the housekeeping. Let's get to the main event. So our keynote speaker today is Brian Posey. And Brian is a true Renaissance man, as you're about to find out. He has an incredible background. In fact, if you refer to Brian as a space cadet, you're not insulting him. He really is a space cadet. He'll tell you a little bit about that. But with that intriguing intro, let's turn this over to you. Here you go, Brian.
Hello, greetings, and welcome. I'm Brian Posey, and in this webcast, I want to talk about improving security and ransomware preparedness in healthcare. So before we get started, I just wanted to give you a few words about me. I'm a freelance technology author and speaker, a 22-time Microsoft MVP, and a commercial astronaut candidate. So one of the things that I wanted to point out in this presentation is that there are various categories of ransomware, and this is something that I'm sure most of you are already familiar with. First of all, there's automated or opportunistic ransomware. This is the kind of ransomware infection that typically occurs when a user clicks on something that they shouldn't, and they end up downloading ransomware to their PC, which then proceeds to encrypt all of their files. So that's one type of ransomware. The next type is human-operated. This is when a user downloads something and it gives an attacker a backdoor, so the attacker comes in and they spend time studying your systems, and then they eventually plant and activate ransomware. And then the third type of ransomware that I wanted to talk about, and one that we really don't hear about all that often, is IoT-based ransomware. IoT is an acronym standing for Internet of Things, and it refers to the various smart connected devices that all of us use on our networks. So attackers will very often leverage these IoT devices as a means of attacking our networks. So that's what I want to talk about in this presentation. So when it comes to IoT ransomware, one of the first things that you have to understand is that IoT ransomware has largely been downplayed by the IT industry. And the reason for this is because a lot of people consider this to be a consumer problem, not a problem that plagues businesses. And one of the big reasons for this is that the attacks very often are targeted at consumers. For example, an attacker might target a smart thermostat, a security camera, perhaps a connected vehicle, or maybe something like a smart appliance or a smart TV or something like that. So IoT ransomware attacks tend to target consumer-oriented devices. And the business model that the attackers use is a lot different than that of more common ransomware, like the ones that I described a moment ago, particularly the opportunistic type. So how does it differ? Well, if you really think about it, the business model that the ransomware authors use is that they want to make the most money with the least possible effort. So they tend to target things that are really popular. That's why a lot of ransomware is designed to attack Windows-based systems. The cyber criminals know that a huge number of people use Windows, so they'll design their ransomware to infect Windows-based systems in an effort to gain the maximum return on investment. In contrast, there are a lot of different types of smart devices out there, and it wouldn't really be practical for a ransomware author to write a ransomware module for every type of smart device. It just wouldn't be cost-effective for them. So they tend to target things that are a lot more popular. And when a cybercriminal does target a consumer-based device, those attacks tend to be targeted. For example, I've heard stories about an attacker who hears that somebody's about to go on vacation, So they'll target the smart thermostat, and maybe they'll turn the heat all the way up or something, and then send a ransom notification to the victim who's already on vacation, and say something like, unless you want to come back home from vacation to a huge electric bill, you'll pay me this ransom. One of the reasons why the attackers like to perform these targeted types of attacks is simply because the stakes aren't as high with an IoT device as they might be with something like someone's laptop or tablet. Because if you really think about it, IoT devices, at least the ones used in the home, tend not to store any data. So let's suppose for a moment that you're home and an attacker targets your smart thermostat. What would you do in a situation like that? Well, you don't really have to worry about data loss because your smart thermostat doesn't contain any meaningful data. So what you would do in a situation like that is just reset the thermostat and download the latest patches from the manufacturer and be done with it. So the odds of an attacker getting paid are pretty slim. That's why they tend to favor targeted attacks. They'll go after someone who's on vacation and can't really do anything to immediately remedy the situation because they're not home. Even though these attacks against IoT devices tend to be relatively rare in the consumer space, they do happen. As a matter of fact, the concept was demonstrated at the DEF CON conference one year when one of the presenters infected a smart thermostat with ransomware in real time in front of an audience. But even though these types of attacks tend to be somewhat rare in the consumer space, they tend to be rampant in healthcare IT. So how common is the problem? Well, in 2022, there was a study by the Ponemon Institute, and that study had some very interesting findings. One of the findings was that 43% of healthcare organizations in the U.S., so we're talking about a study of U.S. respondents, but 43% of those healthcare organizations that responded to the survey experienced a ransomware attack, and 76% of those experienced an average of 3 or more. So ransomware attacks are definitely being performed against healthcare organizations. Now, the same study went on to report that the primary target for cyber attacks are Internet of Things, or IoT devices, and Internet Medical of Things, or IOMT devices, or Medical Internet of Things, IOMT devices. So in other words, the study found that the primary target for cyber attackers were smart connected devices that are used in healthcare settings. And the study went on to say that IOMT devices, or Internet of Medical Things devices, were the root cause for 21% of these ransomware attacks. So think about that for a moment. The study isn't just saying that these devices were involved in the ransomware attacks, it's saying that these devices were actually the root cause of the attacks. So what else did the study find? Well, it also found that 56% of organizations experienced at least one cyber attack in the last 2 years that involved an IoT or IOMT device, and 24% reported adverse impacts resulting in increased mortality rates. So in other words, these attacks that occurred against healthcare environments actually translated to increased patient deaths. So we're not just talking about a financial loss at this point, but we're actually talking patient mortality. The study went on to say that 65% of respondents suffered an average of 5 or more data breaches since 2020, with IoT and IOMT devices being involved 88% of the time. And then it said that while 71% of respondents rated the risk posed by IOMT devices as high or very high, only 21% of respondents reported having proactive security measures in place. So in other words, the study found that these smart connected devices that are used in healthcare settings are involved, or in some cases are even the leading cause of, ransomware attacks in a huge number of cases, and yet very few, only 21%, of the people who responded to the survey reported having proactive security measures in place to guard these devices against attacks. So this raises 2 questions. 1, what types of devices are we talking about? And 2, what can you do to prevent these types of attacks? Well, with regard to the types of devices that are used, here are the top 10 bedside devices that pose the greatest security risk, according to ManageEngine.com. So we're talking about things like infusion pumps, VoIP devices, ultrasound machines, patient monitors, medicine dispensers, gateways, IP security cameras, PAC servers, computerized radiography systems, and DCOM workstations. So what can you do to prevent ransomware attacks against these smart connected devices? Well, there are several recommendations that are given. First, perform a complete asset inventory to identify all managed and unmanaged devices, because you can't secure a device if you don't know about it. Next, ensure the devices are properly authenticated and are communicating only via ports and protocols that have been deemed acceptable by your organization. Also, establish network access control and restrict unauthorized access and privileges to the devices and network. Implement the principles of least privilege access. This helps to prevent cyber attacks. And segment your networks. And the segmentation should be based on things like users, devices, and the criticality of resources. And so a few more recommendations are deploy a SIEM solution that provides real-time security monitoring, advanced threat intelligence, user and entity behavior analytics, and automated incident response capabilities. And you should configure the SIEM solution to discover devices automatically. That way you don't have to worry about manually inventorying and enrolling new devices that come onto your network. Also, apply patches across devices as soon as they've been released by the IoT device vendor. That's a super important one. And then finally, adopt a zero trust policy and implement it in a phased manner to protect against various cyber attacks. So with that said, I'm about out of time, but I hope that you enjoyed the rest of the event. I'm Brian Posey. Thank you for watching.
All right. Thanks for that really informative keynote, Brian. Really interesting information there from that Ponemon report about the threat of attacks on IoT devices for the medical sector. Really, really great stuff. Okay, and now it is time for a quick poll question for everybody. The question, of course, is what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? We've got several time bands there, 0 to 6 months, 6 months to a year, 1 to 2 years, and not sure. So we'll just leave that up there for a couple of moments to give everybody an opportunity to answer that poll. See the responses flooding in there. Really appreciate everybody who's answered the poll. And it looks like it's a pretty even split so far, with 6 to 12 months at kind of the lead in definitive time frames, and then a bunch of people not sure as well. All right, I'm going to leave that up for a count of 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Well, thanks everybody who responded to that poll. We do really appreciate it. So let's get rolling with our sessions. The first presentation in the EcoCast comes from Rubrik, and presenting for Rubrik is Zubin Talavia, who's an advisory sales engineer. Zubin, welcome. Thanks for being here, and I'm going to turn things over to you.
And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you folks. So what I'm going to talk about in the next 15 minutes is just give an overview of Rubrik for healthcare, what we do, what are the features we have, and how it can help protect you against ransomware attacks. So how Rubrik started was in 2014 when we decided to come out of stealth mode. What we did was we came out with a data protection solution that changed or revolutionized what was already there. Right, we made it so that it was very simple to set up, simple to deploy, and it was built from the ground up for cloud and for with security in mind. So we followed the zero trust architecture design right from the beginning. We made sure that our backups were immutable, even before immutable was a word that everybody uses now. We made sure that all our backups were logically air-gapped, so nobody had access to it unless there was only one way to get it, which was through Rubrik. And we provided features that like instant recovery, live mount, business-driven SLAs, which kind of helped customers very quickly deploy their data protection solutions across various workloads. We then followed up with as the customers moved from on-prem to a hybrid cloud environment, we kind of also expanded that across the cloud as well. So if you have any PaaS or IaaS or any cloud native workloads in Azure, Google, or AWS, we were able to protect that with a single platform. We then kind of made sure that we could help customers move to the cloud by doing cloud archival and even recovery in the cloud. And then we added pieces to allow some orchestrated recovery where you could fail from an on-prem environment to like a cloud environment and then fail back, all again under one pane of glass. In about 2017, we came across what was the first ransomware attack that we took notice. We realized at that point that we had data from, the metadata from the customer's environment, because we were backing up everything in the environment. So why not provide them with more intelligence about what they're backing up and what kind of what's going on in the environment? So we kind of built on top of our platform, we built different features that you can see on the screen here, like ransomware monitoring and investigation, where we can actually see some of the threats that are actually in your system. We can tell you what systems are impacted, where in the systems the impact is. We then kind of went further and said, well, let's figure out what kind of data was in those environments. We then kind of added sensitive data discovery and monitoring for those particular workloads, where we can now tell you whether it's HIPAA, PII, PCI, GDPR, any information that you want to tag or at least want to monitor. We then introduced what we call threat hunting and monitoring and proactive use analysis, where we can now scan your backups from the beginning of time for any threats using Yara rules, using file hashes, and can pinpoint very quickly which backups or which part of the data protection environment has the corrupt backup or the malware. And then we can kind of quarantine it out of the box for you and then provide you with some user analysis on, what's going on in the environment. All that, again, is a part of the journey, Rubrik journey, and all under one platform. So how do we do this, right? What are the key challenges that, we have seen customers face from 2017 on? You can see, like, last week, with the high-profile attacks happening right now, that if you have been following the news, businesses are under daily attack, right? Almost 73% of them are in healthcare. Healthcare is one of the most widely targeted, attack or landscape threat for criminal gangs. Now, you may put all kinds of network security tools and firewalls and perimeter tools in place, but all you need to do is, you need to be accurate 100% of the time. The hacker needs to be accurate 1% of the time, right? Only once. And the crown jewels in the environment is not the servers or the storage, but it's your data. And there's always that gap in protection there, right? In the past, we used to worry about, and we still do, but we used to worry about, hey, let's say if there's a fire or a flood or, like a storm, and let's worry about disaster scenario or DR scenarios in that situation. But now we have to worry about ransomware attacks that happen almost daily, right? And that can bring a business down to a complete halt, as you can see happening to various other companies around the world. So how does Rubrik kind of help you out with that, right? So what we do is we kind of help you answer the most critical questions that you have when you are in that situation. That is, if the attacker gets in, how do I know that my backups are protected? Can I rely on them to get back to a safe state quickly? If the endpoint protection systems fails, how do we know what the blast radius is, right? How do I know what systems impacted, where in the systems the impact is? And most likely what we've also seen is this double extortion, where you get hacked, the hacker asks you for ransom for getting your data backups back, and then they'll also ask you for they'll exfiltrate your data, and then ask you for some money to not publish it. So if your data is exfiltrated, how do you know what was exposed, right? Was it something important, or was it something that you don't care about? And then most importantly is, how do you identify a clean recovery point? That's the key, right? You know that you've been impacted. Now, how do I go back to a spot that I can recover quickly from, and that's clean, so that I don't reinfect myself? And then can I automate this, and can I test it out? So this is what Rubrik helps you answer. And if you kind of notice the average response time to a cyber incident, it's about 21 days, right? In 21 days on an average from the time you identify it to figure out what applications are impacted. Okay, is my backup platform viable? Can I rely on it? And then what kind of data was it that I need to contact the regulatory institutions for it? Right from there to the time that I should now figure out when should I recover, right? At that point, you work with the InfoSec teams and your backup admins to recover over and over again to figure out a clean copy. That's where you spend the most time. If you don't know what's the clean point, you will spend majority of those 21 days trying to get to that point. Once you figure that out, the recovery is actually only a small portion of that. And again, all that is possible only after extensive and long hours that are worked by by both your teams. So how is Rubrik unique? Is because we have this unique vantage point. We see all the critical data in your enterprise, right? If you're backing up, virtual environments or physical environments or Epic or any of EMR, EHR systems, cloud, we can kind of see all that data. Now, once we see that data, we can tell you a story about it. We can tell you which files have changed, when and where the malware entered your environment. And then we can provide you with an immutable time machine kind of a view where you can say, this is what happened. This is when I was impacted. So I could go back and recover to this point in time. We have the infrastructure to run this investigation. So there's nothing that you're doing on your own. And we complement what you already have in terms of your network security. We are not replacing your endpoint systems. We're not replacing your IPS, IDS systems in place. What we're doing is complementing it and providing you that last line of defense. So what we do matters, right? What we do is we help boards, executives, and your teams answer these critical questions, and that you saw on the previous slides. The positive business outcomes that we're seeing across 6,000 plus customers is a reduced loss of revenue due to downtime. Because of the tools that we have, we can quickly help you recover your data quickly, which allows you to reduce the loss. You avoid the ransomware payments because you don't have to now worry about your backups being compromised or paying ransom to recover your backups. Your backups are secure because of the immutable nature of Rubrik. What we also seen is we allow you to maintain or improve your cyber insurance coverage. If you kind of go to any cyber insurance company right now, they'll ask you a very high premium for it. If you tell them you have Rubrik, it helps you to reduce your cyber insurance coverage. Also, again, because of all the benefits that you get out of it, you can protect your brand. You can basically, guard your public trust, and also this effect of that is that we allow you to pass audits, whether they're internal audits, external audits. We'll allow you to reduce your regulatory fines and any cost that are associated with sensitive data in case you were hacked and the data was proliferated. So how do we do this, right? So we have the ability to read your data from, whether it's on-prem data centers, whether it's a SaaS platform like M365 or Atlassian or any of the cloud vendors. We then provide you with an immutable air-gapped copy that is secure. We then also, on top of that, because we can read your metadata, we provide you with a time series time machine. Think of it as a time machine backup with metadata information that we collect from the data that you already have. And then it's basically in a modern data protection solution that's easy to deploy, easy and quickly to set up. We kind of help you with with things like encryption detection, sensitive data discovery, where we can actually tell you what kind of data it was, where it was, and what important data was on the systems. We can then help you with threat hunting, quarantining it, providing you with a risk assessment, which gives you like a score of where your risk profile is, so you can kind of improve it and improve your security posture by looking at that risk assessment. And then finally, we allow you the ability to recover data quickly. We provide you with different recovery options. We give you an isolated recovery environment in case you're hit by a ransomware attack and want to quickly recover and test before moving to production. We provide you with automated DR capabilities where you can fail over and fail back from different data centers in case of a natural disaster, along with some local recovery options that are very quick as well. And all that is managed through a single pane of glass, which is our Rubrik Security Cloud, which is a SaaS platform that we provide to all customers. If you want to know more information on that, here's the link, rubrik.com/products, and you can see everything and the demos and presentations and white papers on it. So a couple of quick things before I end. A couple of examples of customers in healthcare that have seen benefits running with Rubrik is, example is Legacy Health, which was a customer that was running some other infrastructure and backup platform before. When they moved to Rubrik, what they noticed was their infrastructure and teams saw like a huge reduction in time savings. Instead of having to manage multiple servers, master servers, media servers, multiple storage devices, they were able to consolidate all into like into a few appliances, which they could then reduce by having an automated policy engine and quick recovery. So that saved time by almost 90%. They had Epic Cache in their environment. They were able to back up and restore their Epic databases and thus meet the Epic honor roll requirements. And it was about at least 2 times faster than what they had seen before. With Rubrik live mount capabilities, which allows us to quickly mount any virtual machine or any SQL or volumes very quickly on Rubrik, they were able to achieve almost near zero RTOs and allow them to kind of meet their internal customer needs very quickly. One other example here is this is the Rush Hospital, which is actually a 600-bed teaching hospital. What they did was they also had M365, and they realized that they did not have protection for their 365 users as they migrated from the on-prem email exchange and SharePoint environments and to M365. They basically moved to 365. They were able to protect it with Rubrik, and we can kind of recover up to 10 to 12,000 mailboxes a day in case you had a complete outage. So they were able to meet SLAs for their recovery purposes with Rubrik. What they also noticed was the backup times and restore times in general were about 4 times faster than their previous environment. And more importantly, from a money or a fiscal perspective, they were able to reduce about almost 40% of their cyber insurance premiums because they went with a solution that was immutable, that was well respected, and that met all their needs from a cyber insurance company. So don't take my word for it. There are about 5,000 to almost 6,000 plus customers in various industries that we have today. They're 100% protected. Along with when you go with Rubrik, you also get access to our ransomware response team, which is available 24/7, 365. That will help assist you when you feel that you have been attacked, or even when you suspect it. Just call us, and we can kind of work with you until you tell us to stop working with us because you're all set. And we also, because we are so confident in our ability to protect you, if you follow our best practices, we have a ransomware warranty out there as well. It's actually 10 million now. And basically that allows you to be rest assured that if you go with Rubrik, you don't have to pay the ransom, and you're protected from ransomware. And we can help you with the recovery, and we can help you with getting up and running very, very fast, so you can reduce your don't lose a lot of revenue and be up and running quick. That's all I had, folks. Thank you for your time. I know we had about 15 minutes to discuss, but feel free to go online and check us out.
Yeah, Zubin, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And you're right, there's not a lot of time and there's a lot to get into. So are you ready, Zubin?
Yep, go ahead.
Perfect. All right. Well, you said at one of your slides, if you have more questions about this, click on the link. And somebody clearly wanted to expand on that quick recovery. So our first question here is wondering if you could expand a little bit, dig in a little bit further on how Rubrik can help with that quick recovery, especially when we're talking about ransomware. And then wondering about, especially if there's a need to restore multiple systems to a clean point in time, and then, of course, quickly.
All right. Yep. Well, that's a great question, Jeff. So what Rubrik offers is what we call an isolated recovery environment. We have the ability to quickly detect, let's say you've been hit by a ransomware attack, we can detect, what systems have been impacted, and then where the impact is in those systems. So instead of finding the needle in the haystack, we'll tell you where the needle is. Once you have the systems, we can then, after we work with your teams, we can run a threat hunt, which is the ability to quickly scan the backups on the systems for a clean copy. That takes the majority of your time in case of you're under an attack. We can tell you which backups are good, which backups are not good. You can quarantine those bad backups. Once you have the good backups, you can restore them into a clean environment that we will provide for you. And then once you can run your own tests, we can roll that right into production. And all that process can be automated as well, which allows you to recover quickly in case you have an attack.
Awesome. Okay. I like that. I really like the analogy of we'll tell you right where the needle is. Stop digging through the haystack. Another question here, because of course we also have a lot of legacy systems we're dealing with and existing systems. And so curious, what are the integrations that Rubrik has available? And in particular, looks like they're wondering if you could clarify what integrations they might have with cybersecurity vendors.
So Rubrik protects workloads across different on-prem, whether it's physical systems, Linux, Windows, Unix, virtual systems, cloud, SaaS. We also have, because we follow an open API policy, we can kind of integrate with third-party vendors like Splunk, Microsoft Sentinel, Palo Alto XOR, Zscaler, DLP solution, and ServiceNow. And these are just the ones that I've just naming, but we can provide, we can basically integrate with any system that is REST API compliant.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we are getting close to the end of time, but I'm going to sneak in one more question for you, Zubin. Is Rubrik able to protect SaaS and cloud workloads? Can it do it all?
Yes. So for cloud, we protect any public cloud workloads like AWS, Azure, GCP, whether it's databases, PaaS, IaaS systems, S3. And then for SaaS, we protect M365, all the different, SharePoint Online, Teams, things like that. For SaaS, we are, we protect Atlassian, Jira, and then coming out with support for Salesforce and some of the others as well.
Awesome. Yes. So it can do all the things. I wish we could keep going, Zubin, because there's obviously a lot more to cover. I think we're going to have to wrap it up. But before I let you go, for the audience out there that is either already a Rubrik customer and wants to kind of learn a little bit more or dig in a little bit further, or somebody who's brand new and wants to get started, what do you recommend for the audience to, jump in with Rubrik?
I would say just definitely go online, rubrik.com/products. There's a whole bunch of information there on white papers, customer case studies. And then if you would like to try out a personal demo or for yourself, please reach out to, there's a button there that you can click on it, and then someone will contact you and help you get started.
Perfect. I like it. All right. Well, Zubin, thank you so much for being here to kick us off on the EcoCast today. It's been so much fun chatting with you as always.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks for the op.
All right. Yeah. And thanks for that great information, Zubin. And thanks to you and Jess for an excellent Q&A. Jess will be tag teaming again on the next one. So now we've got another poll question for everybody. We appreciate your feedback on additional resources you'd like to see from Rubrik. Looks like we had some other questions that we can't get to right here, but the Rubrik team will do their best to respond to all these questions. We'll send them all over to them. I'd also like to remind all of you about the handouts. We've got a link to get more information from Rubrik. Be sure to check that out if you'd like some more detail. Okay, and thanks to everybody who's responded to the poll. We appreciate that feedback. Of course, this is about additional information that you'd like from Rubrik, and you can click on as many of these as you're interested in. So, anything from data sheets to white papers to personal demos, all kinds of options there. So we'll just leave that up there for a little bit, and then we'll move on to our next presentation in the healthcare EcoCast here. Well, Zubin, thanks again for that presentation today. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on Rubrik. And now it's time for our first prize drawing of the day. So again, we were giving away 3 $300 Amazon gift cards, and we're going to give the first one away right now. And this one goes to Joshua Longaroo from Connecticut. So congratulations, Joshua. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. Okay, I'm going to shut down this poll. Thanks to everybody who responded to it. And just like that, we're on to our final presentation for the day. This one is coming from Census. And presenting for Census is Celestine Yaron, who's Director of Business Development. She'll be joined by Jess at the end of the presentation for some Q&A. So You know what to do, folks. Keep asking your questions. Celestine, good to have you here. You have the floor.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you everyone for your time today. My name is Celestine Yaren. I'm the Director of International Sales at Census. If you're not familiar with that name, Census is the internet intelligence platform that empowers governments, enterprises, and hundreds of thousands of security researchers every day to defend their attack surfaces and hunt for threats. Now, amongst all the threat vectors we could discuss today, the one I really wanted to focus on with you is ransomware because of both its surprising trends this year in the last year, as well as the relevance to our specific audience today. You can think of this session in three main parts where we're analyzing one, what's changed in the last year with the ransomware landscape? There was a lot of news. What actually happened? Two, we'll take you through three examples of ransomware close to home for those on the call today. And lastly, we'll hopefully give you some useful resources to help along the way as you make your journey. Now, this is going to be a short 20-minute presentation within a much longer day of sessions for you all. So if you do have questions, we'll make sure to provide our contact details at the end to reach our Census team. So without further ado, before we delve into those three examples, let's get started with what's changing out there for security professionals who are working in the healthcare space. If you take a step back for a moment, in the last 2 years, we've seen a pretty rapid acceleration for healthcare organizations focusing on improving both the quality of their services as well as the profits of their clinical services. We're also adapting to new patient and infrastructure needs, which means we've adopted telemedicine, mobile applications, patient portals, big data, cloud computing for our patient analytics, and even IoT. And we relied more and more on the internet connectivity to process things like our radiology, pharmacy, payment processing, all these departments that need to be interconnected in real time. Now, with all of those shared servers and networks and storage and third-party softwares, what we have in common with all of them is that they're very interesting entry points for ransomware. And as security professionals that are dealing with a brand new perimeter, it means a whole new set of vulnerabilities and misconfigurations just outside of our control. As Corvus Insurance pointed out earlier this year, going into 2024, what they're seeing is that external vulnerabilities are going to be particularly interesting for ransomware groups. Meanwhile, while all of those changes have been happening with healthcare, what we've seen on the attacker economy side is that it's also evolved. It's become significantly less expensive and a lot more accessible to run these campaigns. Does anybody on this call remember back to, like the end of 2022, going into 2023, what we were all thinking maybe roughly about ransomware? Maybe not all of us, but at the start of last year, there was some pretty credible predictions by firms like PwC saying that ransomware as an attack vector would probably plateau, not go down, not go away, but also not significantly expand. Instead, what we saw 2023 become was the second most profitable year to date for ransomware actors that we know of. And according to some reports, we probably saw over 2,000 US hospitals and schools and governments impacted by ransomware alone. And this is really because ransomware as a service is just like any other business. They can invest in things like scaling operations, headcount, buying access, outsourcing, purchasing tools, building their own tools. And if you think of the nature of the model of ransomware as a service, you have multiple entities involved who can all be, working together or profiting in different areas. You have the affiliates, you've got your ransomware groups, you've got the money launderers. There's just a lot happening behind the scenes, and they're equipped with quite interesting tools. We saw this with the Black Cat group. They're considered to probably be, the FAA would call them maybe the second most prolific ransomware service as a group. And in their kind of campaign screens, which the FBI saw after they accessed their servers, was that the affiliates who are using these ransomware programs can see not only the full price demanded, they can see the discount price, they can see the offer expiration, they can see the computer system compromised, the ransomware demand notes, you can see the chats with victims. There's just a lot of information that they can gather. And that means for them, they're operating quite intricate structures. And this was the same group, the Black Cat group, that was able to attack the Transformative Healthcare's Fallon Ambulance Service, which was their subsidiary, and claimed to have about a terabyte of sensitive patient information, including medical and paramedic reports, which impacted in the end about 1 million people. Now, we learned in the end of last year, so December of last year, that the Black Cat ransomware servers were seized by the FBI and that they had developed a decryption tool to help about 500 victims and save about 68 million in ransomware demands. But the ultimate cost and those paying the price is patients, right? To paraphrase Janet Vogel from the US Department of Health and Human Services, cyber safety is patient safety. The public first feels the impact of a ransomware demand in the operations, right? That's the first thing they see, where they see significant increases in, say, ambulance arrivals or diversions, in waiting room times. We see stats around patients leaving without being seen or leaving against medical advice due to shutdowns of systems. And hospitals are really well trained for these scenarios, right? We've gone through a pandemic, we've gone through a series of attacks at this point for many organizations, but that strain is really felt for weeks, if not months. And what the public also sees later on is what that impact also meant for their data, right? So the unplanned shutdowns means that we might have lost patient diagnoses or clinical notes or shift handovers. We might have also lost the access to patient records during that period of time. And that's where, for example, the file and ambulance service experienced their data being exposed. Now, there's a number of resources out there. And if you're dealing with something like this, I'd highly recommend resources like the HHS Cybersecurity Toolkit for healthcare and public health, or the HHS 405D program, which helps you navigate cyber insurance. The FBI, the Justice Department, Europol, international governments, they've all had really significant wins this year in arresting alleged criminals or sanctioning different crypto services. And we also especially saw the development last year of CISA's ransomware vulnerability warning pilot program in 2023, which for 2,700 healthcare organizations meant that they got an early alert or an engagement from CISA regarding a vulnerability that was going to impact them, potentially before that ransomware incident occurred. One of those really great wins that we saw was one of the first ones they had, which is where CISA notified through this exact program 93 different organizations. They were running instances of Microsoft Exchange service with the vulnerability proxy not shell. Now, to add some color to that, for many of us, Census included, we've been watching the evolution of proxy not shell since its earlier days as an exploit called proxy shell. So proxy shell was the predecessor. It was back in August of 2021, had 3 separate vulnerabilities kind of chained together to get an RCE that gave attackers the ability to get a persistent foothold into your Exchange environment. When that 2021 publication happened, it was around August, around also Black Hat of that year, what Census saw was about 175,000 hosts running an Exchange SMTP service. And what we did was we tracked, in what you're seeing in this dashboard, how those hosts were patched or removed, which you can start to investigate even for yourself. This dashboard is still alive today for security researchers who are using Census. And you can start to see how that changed over time. For example, you can start to see version history, and you can start to see geolocation of some of these issues. Now, of course, that evolved into proxy not shell, which is what we eventually heard about and what CISA responded to later as they saw that it continued attack. But for example, if you're interested in looking at the geolocation impact of something, right, you can use Census's dashboard to look at proxy not shell to see what's happening just in Germany, which for some reason right now is the top country. If you're interested in this, again, this dashboard is available online to anyone who wants to access it from the security research community. Now, there was another vulnerability that gained celebrity status last year for healthcare organizations, and that, for many of us, is going to immediately trigger a memory of where we were when we first started hearing about this, which is MOVEit. So to take you forward from those early notifications into the spring and early summer of 2023, our story really with MOVEit starts actually back with the RCE vulnerability in Fortress Go Anywhere MFT software. On its own, that's a super interesting attack. But what is even more interesting is that a few months after February, we saw that same group, the Clop ransomware group, go after another MFT software. This time it was MOVEit. And by the end of May, that critical vulnerability, the first one of several, was announced, in which a SQL injection vulnerability in their web interface allowed for data theft attacks. Within 24 hours of that announcement, Census identified over 3,000 hosts exposed to the internet currently running that service. And within those hosts, there were some really interesting insights. I'll give you 3. One was the type of companies. So this obviously was why it became so newsworthy as well, is because it was a high-profile organization set that were really vulnerable: finance, technology, and of course, healthcare. One really notable name in our space was WellTalk, right? That incident infected or affected nearly 8.5 million people across the US, which made it one of the larger incidents for MoveIt. Secondly, just going off of that 8.5 number, is also that a single vulnerability, the reach of these vulnerabilities, had the potential to serve as a gateway to a data breach that impact in millions. At last count, there's at least 2,000 organizations that have reported being attacked, and we're seeing at least 60 million people impacted. And lastly, while it was a really newsworthy event, and it was probably one of the largest data hacks of the year, if not the largest, what you can see on Census Search today, which is what I'm actually showing you right now, is that 30% of those hosts are still today showing indications of remaining unpatched and potentially vulnerable to this exploit. In other words, this is one of the bigger ones of the year, right? This is our celebrity status vulnerability of the year. As security defenders, it's something we'd fix if we knew our organization was at risk for it and was publicly exposed for it. And if you go into Census Day and you're a Census security researcher, you can recreate this exact query that I'm showing you, and you can even narrow it down to your own organization. Now, I'll take you through one last example, which will lead to some additional resources, and that was the Citrix vulnerability, which we really heard about in probably November, December timeframe of last year, when Fred Hutch, the cancer center in Seattle, had an incident. So they issued a data breach notification back in November, which also impacted about 1 million people roughly. Now, with this attack, what we also saw was an additional tactic that the ransomware actors used to extract a larger payment, which was that they reached out to patients directly and asked for $50 to remove the information from their public data leak site. Now, we're increasingly seeing this as a tactic, especially in the healthcare community, around extortion threats that involve both the patients or their family members and their data being exposed online. Now, the Fred Hutch Center shared that the initial access point was a Citrix vulnerability, which has since been fixed. And this vulnerability was the Citrix bleed vulnerability, which was leveraged by the Lockbit ransomware group, if you remember that from kind of earlier last year. This Citrix bleed vulnerability was a Citrix NetScaler ADC, a NetScaler gateway vulnerability. And for those affected, this is actually the query that you can use to see what's going on the internet with Census Search. We've been tracking this. Our research team has been tracking this since its inception, since we first heard about it, and has made it possible for security researchers to identify whether or not they're exposed. Now, in each of these kind of 3 examples that healthcare organizations were dealing with, I've shown you some of these visuals, right? These kind of query visuals that you're seeing on the page, which you probably haven't seen before. It's kind of inside baseball a little bit here. And very often we get asked, how do you see that information? How do you see all those vulnerabilities or exposures or hosts online? And the answer is that you can think of Census as the Google search or the Google Maps of the internet. We have the largest scanning infrastructure in the world, where we touch every internet-connected device every 3 to 4 minutes. And that helps security researchers identify the spread of ransomware, for example, in this case, or attacker infrastructure, or even their own external vulnerabilities in their organization. And by studying the changing methodology or the scope of the target, it helps us understand how this impacts your organization. So for healthcare organizations who are interested in finding out where they may have end-of-life software or proxy nutshell or Citrix vulnerabilities like the bleed vulnerability, we're also able to geofence those results from that internet map into what looks like this, which is the dashboard of real-time results that can help you prioritize and contextualize internet-facing risks. Some of the features that really matter underneath this is that kind of almost real-time capability where we're scanning your attack surface every single day from the outside in, so you can see exactly what the attackers see. So you can see where those end-of-life software is, where cloud misconfigurations exist, or even where your assets are located. You can also start to use Census, for example, to identify how PII might be exposed on your website with favicons, or how lookalike domains might be deployed. There's a bunch of different use cases that we get just simply because we're scanning from the largest scanning infrastructure in the world. And at the end of the day, most healthcare organizations don't live in silos. The one thing that really stood out to me when I started working on this use case was that healthcare organizations are really interconnected, even if they're not actually part of the same organization. In a study by doctors at the UC San Diego back in May of this year, May of last year, actually, excuse me, they found that 4 hospitals during the month-long ransomware attack that one of them dealt with had a not insignificant impact on each other. So they were geographically located near each other, but they were completely separate hospitals. And they were dealing with a substantial increase of different issues that resulted with one ransomware attack. And what they assessed at the end was realistically that when one hospital is dealing with a cyber incident, the result is a regional disaster for everybody else, because we're all dealing with the impact of ambulances diverted or healthcare organizations struggling to fulfill their requirements for that specific set of things that they serve. The one last thing I'll say about all of this is that you can go directly to see all of the things that I showed you today in Census Search, and you can see those resources I've mentioned, sources that I've mentioned on our website. So I'll say thank you for your time, and I think I'll start to answer some questions now.
Yay, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I've said this before, but I always love listening to you. The way that you explain and storytell is so fascinating. And I know that today was no exception, because we got a ton of questions coming in and we've got a little bit of time to dig in. So are you ready to jump into some audience questions?
Absolutely. Fire away.
All right, I'm going to take a few because, as I said, there was a lot, and there was quite a few coming in that were kind of all around cloud infrastructure. And I know that you talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but I'm wondering if I can just ask you to kind of dive in a little bit deeper and whether or not that's going to affect, usage and adaptation with Census.
Yeah, absolutely. So cloud is definitely something that we've seen as kind of a newer evolution with hospitals, right? If you think about all the patient records that really benefit from being more in the cloud, more accessible across different mobile platforms, patient apps, et cetera. But it's also something that it's taken a while for us to get to. So today, what Census really scans for is we're looking at those top cloud providers, things like AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle, and so forth. And what we're looking for is misconfigurations, especially, right? We're looking for a number of things, but misconfigurations tends to be quite important to hospitals because of that element of the newness of cloud. So for example, an AWS S3 storage bucket being exposed, we found client facial recognition photos in those, right? That were just publicly exposed to the internet, and the organization didn't know. Another area is really around API key exposures, right? I can think of, for example, of a misconfiguration in a cloud environment at a hospital that caused my own medical records to be exposed. And that was really not that long ago in terms of kind of the history of security evolving for hospital organizations, right? And simple misconfigurations that really hurt, because security teams would absolutely fix them if they just knew they were out there.
That's such an interesting, and I think that's so important, that personal experience that you've had with that too, that reminder, and you said this, that when we think about data, and especially when we're looking at ransomware, it's easy to get focused on the sort of the storytelling around that and forget that what you're really talking about are humans. The data in healthcare is human data, and that affects all of us, regardless of our industry. And today we're talking with people in that healthcare industry, but all of us, even just as individuals, as people living in this world, this is something that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, most of us are patients of some healthcare system, whether we remember it or not from our early days, or whether we've, not gone to the doctor in years. So our records are still somewhere, whether it's your hospital records or your dental records or the series of programs you might have been involved in.
What a great point. Yeah, it really is this is an extremely human issue. And I'm going to try to sneak in one more question. I think we've got a few more minutes here. We did get a question when you were giving us a case study and talking about Fallon as a subsidiary. And a question came in from the audience here about how Census would identify vulnerabilities that might affect a parent organization in a situation like that.
Okay, that's actually a very good question. Yes, I did mention there was Transformative Health. Fallon Ambulance Services was their subsidiary. Fallon Ambulance Services was the data incident that happened, but it really impacted the kind of broader group. I'll just actually take us back on the slide really quick, if I can quickly flip back so folks can see. This is the view of an organization's attack surface, right? Just overall. However, what Census has the ability to do is look not just at one organization, but because we have that internet map underneath, we can look at multiple organizations. And it almost relates maybe proximally to my comments at the very end around the UC San Diego case study in which 4 hospitals were impacted. We see this with, for example, counties using Census, where they'll have either multiple cities or districts all involved in one attack surface. Or what they'll do is they'll take out kind of each organization and put them into their own, what we would call a workspace. So it's just a functionality within Census where you can delegate a workspace to one organization and all the folks within that, maybe some of their contractors, for example, as well, that might be working with a hospital, and they can get the same view, but specifically to their organization. And then you can structure it such that if, for example, you have a parent-subsidiary relationship happening, where the parent might be impacted by the brand or impacted overall by the costs that are associated with an incident, they can then have oversight into multiple hospitals and be able to kind of work with each of those hospitals individually depending on their unique case without ever kind of exposing each of the hospitals to another organization. And potentially just kind of giving too much information to another organization. And it's actually a good point that you brought that up to whoever's in the audience for that. Thank you. Because one thing I didn't really talk about was just the number of times that we saw in the news this year. I don't know if people really caught this. I'm sure for folks who are really in this industry, you were kind of intimately aware of this, but there was a number of times in the news last year where one hospital would be impacted. And then you realize it was actually several hospitals because of their ownership or because they were using a shared service of some kind. And so you saw multiple, for example, in one incident, it was across several states, right, where they were all impacted by this kind of outage and this ransomware attack in which at first it looked very straightforward. It was one hospital. And then suddenly you realized, oh my goodness, actually we're dealing with multiple hospitals that are going to be dealing with outages, delayed services, rerouted ambulances. It was a bunch of messes out there this year. So it's actually a very good point that there's kind of an interconnectedness that Census as just a platform supports that can allow you to really address it holistically rather than in a silo.
That, that flexibility, that's so important, and adaptability, because obviously we know in this industry, yeah, as you say, we're dealing with interconnected, and we're also dealing with, and you mentioned this right at the start, the, freelancers, contractors, part-time, it's not a standardized industry where each hospital or each healthcare organization, a healthcare provider is going to have the exact same setup. So being able to have this agility in terms of your view and being able to see that bird's eye view is really vital. And it sounds like that's an important part of what you're offering.
Yeah. And you remind me kind of in this discussion, and I'm hoping folks are still here to hear this, that in giving those examples of hospitals, the hope is kind of naming specific hospitals. The hope is not to kind of shame any hospital individually, but rather just create some learnings. I think it was a very interesting stat. So at the beginning of last year, we saw kind of a very major win for the FBI against the Hive ransomware group, responsible for about 100 million in ransomware demands, quite an excessive group. Or quite a successful group, I should say. And one of the things that the FBI noticed was that in taking over the Hive servers, they realized that only 20% of the victims had reported that they had been dealing with an incident. And so there was a lack of learning across the community, either because people didn't know or because they quietly paid the demand, or for whatever various reasons, most likely because they didn't know that they had been attacked or that they were being watched. And so there's a lack of learning from very real world case studies. And so that's the hope today, is that kind of everyone here is able to take away a very real case study and a very specific resource from Census on kind of either a dashboard or a query that you can go and see some insights for yourself today.
Well, I think that is a great place to end it, although I'm sure we could have entire webinars on webinars and webinars digging into this further. And I hope that from most of our audience out there, this is just a starting point, and they'll jump in and keep asking questions and keep learning more. If you wanted to give them that sort of next step with Census, what would you recommend as the best way to get started?
Yeah, there's absolutely a couple of ways. So Census as a community, we started as an open source tool. So it's important for us to make our research accessible to anybody. So you'll see that you can go to the Census website right now and sign up for a community license with us, just census.com or census.io. or census search is the kind of product that you're looking for on that webpage. You can also, for any of these dashboards, come talk to our sales team. We're very happy to chat with you, just kind of educationally, or tell you a little bit more about what we're seeing happening on the internet. So there's multiple ways to reach us, but I'd start with just our website, census.com, and you can go from there.
It's a great place to start. Celestine, thank you so much for being back here with us again today. It's always so great to chat with you. I really appreciate your time. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. It's been fantastic to be here again. Thank you all, and thank you everybody who stayed on.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for that awesome presentation, Celestine, and great stuff. And thanks to you and Jess for the fantastically informative Q&A there. And now it's time to get all of your feedback on additional resources that you'd like from Census. I'd also like to remind you about the handouts. Census has provided a PDF with more information about their solution, so be sure to check that out if you'd like some more detail, alongside the opportunity here to get a bunch of other different types of resources, and feel free to click on as many different types as would be helpful to you. Okay, well, thanks to everybody who's responded to the poll. We do appreciate your feedback, and we'll just leave that up here for another moment, and then we'll move on. So we'll leave that up to do our prize drawing, and it's time for our final prize drawing of the event. So the winner of the last two $300 Amazon gift cards were, give me 1 second to get to them. Joshua Longaroo and oh, 1 second. Sorry for the delay. Hang on. I'm going to go into another platform to grab this. Give me 1 sec. Appreciate everybody sticking with me here. Ben says the delay is fine. It just proves you're live. LOL. Yeah, good one, Ben. Yeah, and maybe Jordan, maybe you can help me out with grabbing the other two prize winners, because I seem like I've lost access. Give me 1 second. Okay, thank you, Jordan. So our final prize winner is Stephen Krull from Wisconsin. That's Kreul. And we also had Morteza Mayari from California. So Stephen and Morteza, congratulations. We'll be in touch about getting your cards. And thanks everybody for your patience on those. I don't know what happened. All right. So with that, let's close down this poll. Thanks to everybody who responded to that. Now, I learned a lot about security today, and I hope you did too. And we do have another event coming up shortly about another EcoCast coming up on February 13th. That's next Tuesday, which is dedicated to monitoring and optimizing a hybrid cloud environment. That starts at noon Eastern Time, which is 9 a.m. Pacific. And as you can see, it features some of the top vendors in the industry, and you can sign up for that event right after this one is done. Meanwhile, we'd love to hear from you if you would be interested in sponsoring an event like this. We have hundreds of events each year, and if one of them would be a good fit for you or a custom webcast, contact us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank our presenters for their great sessions today. I also want to thank Rubrik and Census for making this happen. And I want to thank all of you who came to this event for being here with us. It's a pleasure to see you here, and I really appreciate your time and your interest. So that's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.